My name is Rima and I teach the Art Fundamentals class at Visual Arts Brampton. Our lesson today is Draw and Shade a Cup. Today we're going to be practicing some proper shading techniques. We use shading to transform a basic shape like this circle here into a sphere. So we turn a shape into a form that has depth and volume. So we have to pay attention to where the light is coming from to help us shade our objects. In this drawing, the light is coming from this direction. And so the lightest part is going to be here and the darkest part is going to be on the other side. So when the light hits an object, what it does, it kind of divides the object into a light area and a darker area. So the light side will include the really light part, which is this, which is the highlight, and then a slightly less light part or a bit darker part, which is called the halftone or the mid-tone area. So that's between the really light area and the really dark area. Now the darkest part over here, that's the form shadow or the shadow that is on the object, okay? We also have the darkest part of the shadow, and that's called the form shadow core. And there's another important shadow that we need to talk about, and that's the cast shadow. So when the light hits the object, what it does is it's blocking the light and it's projecting the shadow of the object on the other side. It's casting that shadow. That's why it's called the cast shadow. Okay? It starts really dark, nearest where it's near the object here, but then it becomes a little bit lighter as it moves away from there. Okay? So there's one more shadow that we need to talk about, and that's the shadow that is reflected onto the object itself. So the light comes from this direction, kind of bounces over the object, and then it bounces back into the object, and it gives us a reflected light. We're not going to be using this reflected light today. We're going to be using everything else that we talked about, okay? So let's grab our supplies. We need a sheet of paper or your sketchbook. I'm going to be using a sheet of paper. You can use any paper that you want, but if you use drawing paper, you'll have a bit more tooth or a bit more texture to the paper, and your shading will look slightly better. Okay, so I have my paper, I have my sketching, my drawing pencil. In this case, I'm using a 2B pencil. If you have sketching pencils, you can use that. If you don't, a regular pencil works just as fine, okay? But you do need a white eraser, so grab that one. Don't use the eraser that's at the end of your pencil, okay? All right, let's start. So for my drawing today, I'm going to be using this image, this photo of a mug that has a very nice handle and has some really nice shadows and highlights. So when you use a photo or an image to draw from, this is called a reference image. So let's start. First, we're going to do a very quick sketch of our cup, okay? And the best way to do this is to kind of draw a very quick circle, okay? This is just for me to figure out how big my form is. So I have my circle, And I'm going to kind of draw a line at the top and then another line at the bottom. And this is going to give me the shape of the cup. So I'm not too worried about how many lines I have over here. I'm going to clean this up afterwards, okay? I'm not going to grab my eraser and start erasing right now. I'm going to be drawing my cup, the shape of my cup. It's going to be a bit narrower at the top and then much more narrow at the bottom. Then I'm going to draw the handle. So my handle is not too big. It starts maybe over here, and it's not too big and not too small, okay? And it's following that kind of a curve, okay? So notice how it's a little bit thicker on the part that meets the cup, okay? I don't want to put my line over here where it's cutting the cup in half or way up high. It's kind of lower, maybe a third of the size of the cup, okay? This much, all right? Now I can take my eraser and kind of neaten up some of those lines. So I don't want you to erase too much, and again, if you're using a regular pencil, I don't want you to use, if you can avoid it, avoid using the pink eraser at the bottom, because it kind of leaves, you know, marks sometimes. Another thing that I want to do is I want to figure out where my light source is, or where my light is coming from. So it's coming from this side, okay? So what it's doing is it's going over the object and it's creating a shadow right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw kind of a flattened circle, which is called an ellipse, and then maybe another circle right next to it, just to remind me that this shadow is going to be dark, and then it's going to get lighter and lighter over here, okay? Ready to do some shading. So let's take a look at my reference photo and see where the light is coming from, where my highlights are, etc. Okay, so my light is coming from this side, and this is the part that's going to be the lightest part in the cup. And kind of works like this, like a stripe over here, and then there's this part that has the mid-tones or the half-tones. So this is where I'm going to be shading a little bit more than over here. And then this is where the shadow is, the form shadow. So this is really dark, and that's where I'm going to be putting a darker shading. Then I can see that there's some dark parts over here, and some lighter parts over here. But I also see where there are highlights on the handle and on the rim. So I'm going to remember those. And then I have, of course, the cast shadow that's really dark next to the cup, and then it becomes a little lighter as it goes away from it, okay? All right, so let's start by maybe looking at the cup again that we drew and decide where we want to keep some areas white. So I'm going to draw out some parts of the cup like this so that I remember not to shade them, to keep them white, okay? Now I'm going to start shading. So I'm not going to be shading much over here, if at all, because this is the part where the light is hitting the cup and it's quite light. It's almost all of it a highlight, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start shading maybe towards the middle of my cup, and then work my way over here in that direction, okay, towards the handle. All right, so I'm going to flip my pencil on its side, because if I start shading with the tip of my pencil, all I get are some sharp lines. What I want is some really subtle, a really light hand, and to do some really light shading, okay? So as you can see, kind of shading my cup on a curve to show that this is a round object. So another thing that I wanted to let you know that you start from the farthest side of your drawing and then you work your way to the other side, and that helps with minimizing the mess, you know, because when you're using a pencil, especially if you're using a sketching pencil that has a bit of a thick line like this 2B or a 4B, it kind of gets messy if you drag it across the page. Now that I'm done with my cast shadow and I have most of my cup done, I'm going to move to my handle here, maybe kind of fix the shape a little bit and do some of the darker shadows first where it's getting attached to the mug, and then there's another part here, and then the rest of it is a little lighter I'm gonna make sure not to color those light areas. Keep them white to show the highlights, okay? There we go. Now I'm going to stop and take another look at my cup and see where I can make it look a little bit maybe neater. So I'll go around the outline a little bit, maybe soften this area here so that the line doesn't show as much. Add a bit more shadows. Remember the core shadow that we talked about? This is the part where the shadow is the darkest. So I'm going to make this part a little bit darker, like my reference photo right here. Show you. Okay. So this is what I'm trying to make darker over here, just so there's a bit of variation there. I'm not going to worry too much about the refracted light for now. Okay, just add there we go. Just add a bit more shadow where you need to make it a bit darker. Kind of work your way around. Just make sure that you don't end up with just stripes of light and shadow. Okay, you want something to be a little bit more a little neater. Okay, so let's kind of outline the cup for now. And make sure that you're not resting your hand on your drawing like I just did. Don't do that because it just creates a bit of a mess with the dust from the pencil. Okay, now I can also use my eraser to make sure that my highlights are really white and clean, which is not the case here. Okay. And here we are. This is how you shade something that is spherical or a circular form. Okay, and there we go. And if you want, you can add a bit of shading in the background just to make it a bit more interesting, or you can just leave it as is. Now that's it, it's all done. Here's my drawing, and you can practice shading similar objects that you find at home. For example, you can grab an apple or an orange or whatever you find that works. That's it. Thank you for watching our video. Be sure to like, comment and subscribe. See you next time.